My husband got really mad when I didn't join him at his friend's barbecue. He mocked, "Don't want people to see how fat you've gotten?" I whispered, "They'll be too busy watching you drink." Later, I started going to the gym with his friend's wife. Weeks later, he begged me to cancel my membership. We lived in a modest two-story outside Charlotte. Brick facade, white shutters. One of those neighborhoods with cul-de-sacs and kids riding scooters until dinner. From the outside, we looked like we had it together. Brent made good money in real estate. I worked part-time at a local bookstore. Our kids, Sam and Kayla, were in high school and middle school, always busy with sports or after-school clubs. But inside our home? It had felt cold for a long time. Not because of any one big moment, but the way you slowly freeze in winter without noticing until your fingers are numb. Brent wasn't always like this. When we met, he was magnetic. Confident in a way that made everyone want to follow him. He made me feel special. And I clung to that version of him for too long, even as his confidence turned into something darker: arrogance, sarcasm, control. The slow unraveling started after our second kid. I gained weight. I was exhausted all the time. Postpartum hit hard, and while I smiled in family photos, inside, I was dragging myself through the day. Brent started making little comments. At first, they sounded like concern. Maybe try taking a walk after dinner. Or, you'd feel better if you lost just a little weight. But soon it became, you really gonna eat that, and I miss how you used to look. When I stopped reacting, he started ignoring me. Then came that barbecue. Rob, one of Brent's college friends, was hosting. Celine, Rob's wife, had always been kind to me. She was one of those people who didn't try too hard but made you feel seen anyway. I hadn't planned on going, I hadn't told Brent, but my period had come early, I had cramps like knives, and I was wearing my oldest sweatpants and a heating pad. But Brent had already decided that my absence was a humiliation for him. So when he asked if I was ready, and I said I wasn't going, and he fired off that nasty little insult, "Don't want people to see how fat you've gotten?" I didn't even flinch. I whispered back, "They'll be too busy watching you drink." That night, he didn't come home until after midnight. I heard the car pull in, the front door open and close. No apology. No words. Just the smell of beer drifting into our room. The next morning, I got a text from Celine. "Hey Ava. Totally random, but I just signed up for a trial at Iron House Fitness, off South Tryon. Wanna come? Could use the accountability, lol." I stared at the message for a while. Thought about saying no. Thought about how sore and embarrassed I'd feel in a gym. Then I thought about Brent's smirk the night before. Sure. When? We met the next day. I wore a baggy t-shirt and sweatpants. The gym wasn't fancy. It smelled like sweat and rubber, and the trainers looked like they didn't believe in sugar. But there was something oddly comforting about it. Nobody was filming themselves. Nobody was judging me. Everyone was just doing the work. Celine introduced me to Jody, a no-nonsense trainer who used to be a Marine. She didn't baby me. Just showed me how to lift a dumbbell without injuring myself. The first day, I lasted 20 minutes and thought I'd pass out. But I came back. And again. And again. Within 2 weeks, I was going 4 days a week. Not because I wanted to get revenge. Not because I wanted to be hot again. But because I felt awake. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged in my own body. Brent noticed. At first, he said nothing. Just looked at me with mild curiosity when I'd come home in leggings and a tank top, sweating and red-faced. Then one morning, as I was filling my water bottle, he asked, "Going again?" "Yeah," I said. "Leg day." He nodded, but there was something behind his eyes. Like a twitch he couldn't quite suppress. A few days later, he asked, "You going with Celine?" "Yeah. She's been acting weird," he said. "You two talk about stuff?" I didn't even answer that. That same night, he tried initiating sex for the first time in months. I declined. Gently, but firmly. After that, the comments started again. But they were different this time. You've changed. You're obsessed with the gym. You're never around anymore. I said nothing. Because I had changed. And he was finally starting to realize he couldn't control that. Then one morning, as I laced up my sneakers, he said, "Can you cancel the membership? I think it's affecting things here." I stared at him. How? You're distant. You don't talk to me anymore. You only talk to me when you're insulting me. He flinched at that. But it was true. I'd been invisible to him for years, and now that I wasn't, it made him uncomfortable. Later that week, I found out he had texted Celine, without my knowledge, asking her to stop going to the gym with me. That we were feeding off each other's negativity. Celine showed me the message. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so pathetic. So transparent. You okay? She asked. More than okay, I said. Because I finally saw it clearly, this wasn't about the gym. Or Celine. Or anything I was doing. It was about control. About him losing the version of me that tiptoed around his moods, that absorbed his criticisms, that stayed small so he could feel big. And I wasn't that version anymore. Not even close. After Celine showed me Brent's text, we sat in the car together for a while. She didn't say much. Just let me breathe. I stared at the windshield, the condensation rolling down slowly like the thoughts in my head. There was no fire in me, just clarity. The kind that hurts more than it soothes. He's scared, I finally said. Yeah, Celine replied. He should be. The rest of the day was quiet. I picked Kayla up from choir practice, made spaghetti for dinner, folded 2 loads of laundry. Just normal things. But everything felt different. The space between me and Brent had gone from uncomfortable to unlivable. We were ghosts occupying the same house. That night, I walked into the bedroom and found him already in bed, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when I entered. I changed into my pajamas, turned off the lamp, and slid under the covers. He put his phone down. You're really not going to talk to me? He asked in the dark. I stared at the ceiling. About what? He exhaled sharply. About all this. About us. There hasn't been an us for a long time, Brent. He turned to face me. So this is it? You get in shape, make a new friend, and I'm just disposable? I turned my head and looked at him, really looked at him. The lines on his face were deeper than I remembered. His eyes weren't cruel right now. Just tired. But that didn't change anything. You stopped seeing me a long time ago. I just stopped pretending it didn't matter. He said nothing. Eventually, he rolled back over and faced the wall. The next day, I went to the gym like usual. Jody asked if I wanted to try the ropes. I did. It was hard, even. But when I finished, she clapped me on the back and said, "You're stronger than you think." It hit me harder than I expected. Afterward, Celine and I grabbed smoothies. She mentioned she was thinking about leaving Rob. We're just not good for each other anymore, she said, wiping condensation off her cup. And I think I was too scared to admit it. I nodded. I think we all are. Until we're not. We sat in silence for a while, just watching cars pass by on South Tryon. It was a gray afternoon. The kind that makes everything feel heavier. When I got home, Brent was already there. Early. Sitting in the kitchen with a beer, tapping at his phone. You didn't say where you were going after the gym, he said without looking up. I don't have to. He looked up then, clearly annoyed. You think you're better than me now? I walked past him, opened the fridge, grabbed a water bottle. No. But I'm definitely better than I was when I let you talk to me like this. He leaned back in his chair. You're out of control. No, I said. I'm finally in control. You just don't like it. That night, he tried to play nice. Asked about my day, offered to rub my shoulders, joked about ordering takeout from the Thai place we used to love. But I saw through it. The charm that once felt magnetic now felt calculated. It was like he was performing a version of himself he thought I'd still fall for. But I didn't. The next morning, I dropped the kids off at school and instead of heading straight home, I drove to a small park off Rye Road. Just sat there. Thinking. Not about whether I wanted to stay in the marriage. That part was clear. I didn't. I was thinking about how to do it. How to make it as painless as possible for Sam and Kayla. How to untangle 18 years of shared bills, shared birthdays, shared holidays. And how to explain to people who'd only ever seen our Christmas cards that the smiling couple they thought they knew hadn't existed in a long time. When I got home, Brent was in the garage, reorganizing tools he never used. I stood in the doorway for a minute. I've called a lawyer, I said. He didn't turn around. Just froze. I'm filing for separation. Now he turned. You're serious? Yes. You're throwing this away? No. I'm finally done picking up the pieces. He stepped forward. We can fix this. I shook my head. You never thought anything needed fixing. You were okay with how things were. You just don't like that I'm not anymore. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't either. Not fully. But I liked her. I respected her. And that was new. Over the next few days, Brent tried everything. Anger. Guilt. Nostalgia. He dug up old photos, played our wedding song while I was cooking, tried to get the kids on his side without being obvious about it. But the kids? They weren't dumb. Sam came into my room one night, sat on the edge of the bed. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. He fiddled with the hem of his hoodie. You don't have to stay for us. You know. I blinked. What do you mean? I know you and Dad aren't happy. I see it. I swallowed hard. I never wanted you to feel stuck in the middle. I don't. I just want you to be okay. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for them, too. Because what they'd been learning in that house was how to live in silence. How to swallow your truth. And I wanted to show them something else. Something better. The weeks that followed were quiet in that strained, unnatural way, like when you know a storm's coming, but the sky hasn't cracked yet. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Brent was still there, sleeping on the couch now, telling the kids it was because of his snoring, though nobody really bought that. I started keeping a journal. Not the kind with poetic language or deep reflections, but simple thoughts. Lists. Reminders of who I was becoming. Monday, leg day. Tuesday, book club, ask Anna about that memoir she mentioned. Wednesday, call the lawyer back. Don't back down. I didn't realize how long it had been since I had things that were just mine, my plans, my routines, my peace. Brent, on the other hand, was unraveling in slow motion. He was drinking more at home, which was a change. Before, he liked to keep that part of himself outside, at bars, at Rob's, at networking dinners. Now, he nursed beers on the patio while scrolling through his phone, sometimes watching old videos of us on his tablet at night like that would change anything. One night, I came out to water the plants and caught him watching a clip from Sam's 5th birthday. It was me on the screen, tired, sweaty, holding a tray of cupcakes, smiling anyway. Brent paused the video. You were happy back then, he said without looking at me. I didn't reply. He turned toward me, his voice lower. We had something good. You can't just erase it. I'm not erasing it, I said. But I'm not staying frozen in it either. He didn't argue. Just pressed play again, letting the laughter from years ago fill the silence between us. Celine and I were now regulars at the gym. Our bodies were changing, sure, but that wasn't the part that mattered. We were lighter in spirit. Sharper in mind. More present. We didn't talk about our husbands much anymore. It was almost like we didn't need to. Everything we needed to say had already been said between sets and sweat and breathless laughter in the locker room. One afternoon, after a grueling workout, we sat in her car, sipping from our water bottles, when she turned to me and said, "Do you ever think, maybe we were just placeholders?" I raised an eyebrow. Placeholders? For the life they thought they were supposed to have. The wife, the kids, the house. But not the person behind it. I thought about that. Maybe. Or maybe they just never expected us to grow. We sat there a while longer, watching the sky turn that late afternoon gold. The tension in the house kept building. Brent started doing things he never cared about before. Suddenly he wanted to help with dinner, tried initiating family movie nights, even volunteered to drive Kayla to her friend's birthday party, something he'd always claimed was mom territory. But it wasn't out of care. It was out of fear. He was trying to patch holes in a ship that was already sinking. One Saturday, I came home from a grocery run and found him in the garage again, this time rearranging a shelf he'd ignored for years. He stopped when he saw me. "I've been thinking," he started. "We could do therapy." I nodded slowly. "You're welcome to." I already started a few months ago. That seemed to throw him. Without me? I needed to understand what happened. What I let happen. He stepped closer, frustration rising. "So that's it? I'm just the villain now?" "No," I said. "You're just not the hero of my story anymore." He didn't say anything to that. Just stood there, breathing hard, jaw clenched like he wanted to fight with words he hadn't figured out yet. Later that night, I heard him crying in the garage. That part hurt more than I expected it to. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because I knew he finally understood that I meant it. I filed the papers officially on a Tuesday morning. My hands didn't shake. I felt calm. Focused. The lawyer, a woman named Angela, nodded respectfully as I signed. "You're one of the quiet ones," she said. "What does that mean?" "The ones who've already mourned the marriage long before they walk in here." That night, I told the kids. I sat them down in the living room, Brent sitting stiffly across from me. I did most of the talking, tried to keep my voice steady, my words gentle. "This isn't about anyone doing one bad thing," I told them. "It's about years of things we didn't fix. We're not going to be married anymore, but you still have a mom and dad who love you." Kayla cried. Sam didn't. He just asked, "So who's moving out?" Brent cleared his throat. "I will." I looked at him. That wasn't the plan we had discussed. But I also didn't stop him from saying it. Because part of me wondered if he was finally realizing that staying wasn't the same as being wanted. The next week, he started sleeping at Rob's. He took some of his clothes, a few personal things. Told the kids it was temporary, but we all knew it wasn't. I spent that first night alone in the house like someone learning how to breathe differently. Not better. Just unfamiliar. There was no shouting. No breakdown. Just the low hum of a dishwasher and the quiet realization that life was shifting in a way that couldn't be undone. The next morning, I woke up early. Opened all the windows. Let the fresh air in. And then I went to the gym. A few days after Brent moved out, the quiet really settled in. Not just in the house, but in my head. That kind of silence is unnerving at first. I'd gotten so used to walking on eggshells, anticipating moods, filtering my own thoughts, adjusting my tone to match his temperature, that when it was just me and the kids, I realized how loud my own peace felt. There were no tense dinners. No subtle jabs. No sulking in the living room when I didn't act exactly the way he wanted. The kids noticed it too. Kayla started humming again while she did her homework, A little habit she had when she was younger but had slowly stopped. Sam hung around the kitchen more, not buried in his room or behind a closed door. We were still adjusting, of course. There were questions. Quiet ones mostly. Is this for good? Kayla had asked one night while we were brushing our teeth side by side. I don't know what for good means, baby, I said gently. But it's for better. She looked at me in the mirror, toothbrush dangling in her hand. You seem happier. I didn't respond right away. Just smiled. Because I didn't want to load her little heart with all the ways I hadn't been happy for years. She deserved a mom who smiled without it being a performance. Brent still came around. At first he hovered. Picked the kids up from school, brought groceries unasked, offered to take care of the yard. I let him, for a bit. Maybe because I was curious to see how long the performance would last. It didn't take long before the cracks showed. He started showing up unannounced. Once I caught him lingering in the driveway after dropping Sam off, staring up at the house like he expected it to shrink without him inside. Another time, he let himself in while I was at work to get a few things and rearranged some of the living room furniture back to how it used to be. That night, I told him, calmly but firmly, that he needed to ask before coming inside. I lived here for 18 years, he said, eyes wide like I was being unreasonable. And I lived in your shadow for just as long, I replied. That's over now. He didn't respond. Just stood there, keys in his hand, realizing that something he'd never questioned before had finally been revoked, access. He didn't have access to me anymore. Not my time, not my emotions, not my space. At the gym, things were different, too. I wasn't just there to escape anymore. I was growing. Genuinely changing. Jody noticed. One morning during cooldown, she walked by and said, "You're holding yourself differently." I asked what she meant. You used to apologize for taking up space. Now you own it. It stuck with me. All day. Because it was true. At the grocery store, I walked taller. I didn't shrink when someone brushed past me in the aisle or feel the need to justify every item in my cart. I wasn't dressing differently exactly, but I wasn't hiding either. I wore leggings and tank tops without obsessing over whether my arms looked too soft. One Sunday, while I was stretching in the gym lobby after a group class, a woman around my age approached me. You're Ava, right? I nodded, cautious. I'm Melina. My sister goes here too, she said you started coming a few months ago. Said she's noticed how much you've changed. I blinked. Oh. Thank you, I think? Melina laughed. No, it's a good thing. You just seem steady. Like you found your ground again. Steady. That word stayed with me. Not SXY. Not strong. Not confident. Steady. After years of emotional turbulence, manipulative calm, and walking the tightrope of someone else's moods, steady felt revolutionary. A few weeks later, Brent asked if we could talk. He was sitting in the car when I came out of the bookstore after my Saturday shift. Just waiting there, like it was still normal for him to surprise me. I hesitated but got in the passenger seat. I've been thinking a lot, he said. About what happened. About us. I didn't interrupt. Just let him speak. I know I was hard to live with, he continued. And I know I didn't appreciate you. Not the way I should have. There was a pause. I said nothing. But I think we rushed this. Maybe we could slow things down. Try counseling together. He looked at me like he expected something, hope, relief, gratitude. I gave him a small nod. I've already gone to counseling. And I didn't rush. I waited longer than I should have. He looked deflated, but not surprised. You've changed, he said softly. You don't even sound like you anymore. That made me pause. Because I was me. For the first time in years. I found my voice again, I said. Maybe you just never really listened to it before. He looked away. And I got out of the car. Rob and Celine separated a few months later. Apparently Brent wasn't the only one whose drinking and emotional absence had gone unnoticed for too long. Celine told me she was moving to Asheville for a fresh start. Said she wanted trees, mountains, a place to breathe deeper. We cried when she told me. In the gym parking lot, sweaty and sore, holding on to each other like sisters. I wouldn't have made it through this without you, I said. She shook her head. You always had it in you. You just needed someone to remind you. Around the house, the energy was different now. Peaceful. The kids adjusted in their own way. Kayla started baking more. I found scones in the kitchen every other weekend. Sam asked if he could volunteer at the library with me over summer break. It wasn't perfect. Life never is. But we laughed more. Talked more. Nobody was treading carefully. One night, I was sitting on the back porch with a glass of tea when Sam came out and sat beside me. You look. I don't know. Free? I smiled. That's because I am. He leaned back and stared at the stars. I think I get it now. What? Why you had to leave? I put my hand on his. Thank you. A couple of months had passed since Brent moved out, and life had found this quiet rhythm, slow, deliberate, and surprisingly full. The house still creaked in the mornings the same way it always had. The kids still argued over the remote and forgot to put their dishes in the sink. Bills still arrived, laundry still piled up, and sometimes I still found myself staring out the window for no real reason. But there was this subtle difference in everything. Peace wasn't something I had to search for. It was just there. In the soft background of my days. Brent's presence, though reduced to a few texts and scheduled visits, still lingered like the scent of old cologne in a sweater you haven't worn in years. Sometimes I'd hear a noise outside, look up instinctively, and expect to see him pulling into the driveway. I never did. But the imprint of those years, those habits, those didn't vanish overnight. One Friday night, Kayla was at a sleepover, and Sam was out with friends. I made myself dinner, grilled salmon, quinoa, a side of roasted vegetables. Nothing fancy. Just something I actually wanted to eat instead of the usual frozen pizza we used to settle for. Afterward, I lit a candle and sat at the kitchen table, flipping through an old notebook I'd found while cleaning the hall closet earlier that day. It was full of scribbled ideas from years ago, plans for a side business I once dreamed of starting. A little cafe bookstore hybrid, where I'd serve homemade pastries and host readings from local authors. I'd written those notes when the kids were toddlers, when sleep was a fantasy and Brent was working late every night. I had tucked the idea away because it seemed laughable. Unrealistic. I sat there that night, rereading every bullet point like I was reconnecting with a younger version of myself. One who was still hopeful. Still reaching for something. The next morning, I emailed a friend of mine, Mel, who owned a tiny indie bookstore in Plaza Midwood. Asked if she'd ever consider adding a small coffee cart inside. She replied an hour later. Mel, yes. Let's talk. This is perfect timing. I was actually thinking of expanding a bit. I stared at the message for a while, not out of doubt, but out of awe. How long had I told myself I didn't have time? That I was too tired? That I needed to wait until things calmed down? Now I had time. And quiet. And space. And I wasn't about to waste it. Brent's behavior changed again around this time. At first, after the move, he had tried to prove how much he was stepping up, showing the kids he was still around, texting me polite reminders about soccer games and PTA meetings, even offering to help with errands. But when it became clear I wasn't going to use the divorce as a temporary scare tactic, that I wasn't going to beg him to come back, his patience began to wear thin. He started canceling pickups last minute. Claimed work emergencies. Missed Kayla's band recital. Forgot Sam's dentist appointment. Then the tone of his text changed. Sharper. Shorter. Brent, you always make me out to be the bad guy. Brent, you're poisoning the kids against me. Brent, Celine moved out, by the way. So congratulations. Another marriage ruined. I didn't respond. I'd learned that silence was often the most powerful answer. One day, during a particularly chaotic afternoon, Kayla had forgotten her science project at home, Sam needed new cleats, and the fridge had completely died. I came home to find a manila envelope on the porch. Inside, a letter from Brent's lawyer. He wanted to renegotiate custody. Not full custody, he wasn't that delusional, but more time. More control. I stared at the paper, then picked up my phone and called Angela. Calmly. Clearly. He's testing boundaries, she said. Happens a lot when one party realizes they've lost control in one area. They try to reclaim it somewhere else. I felt it in my chest, this familiar tension, like I was being pulled back into a version of myself I'd worked so hard to leave behind. Angela paused, then said, "Don't worry. We'll handle it." I hung up, took a deep breath, and poured myself a cup of coffee. Then I started sketching logo ideas for the coffee nook Mel and I were planning. Because I refused to let him drag me back into the mud while I was finally learning how to grow. A week later, Brent called. Not texted. Called. That was rare these days. I was folding laundry, the phone on speaker. "What's going on with the kids?" he asked, no preamble. "They're distant with me." Cold. "They're teenagers," I said. "They're figuring things out." "This is your influence," he snapped. "You've turned them against me." I stayed quiet. "I'm their father, Ava." "Yes," I said. "And you need to show them that. Not just say it." There was silence. Then a sigh. "I don't know how to fix this." I felt a pang of something, sadness maybe, or a flicker of the old empathy I used to pour into him like water into a cracked vase. But I couldn't rescue him anymore. That had never been my job, even though I'd tried for too long to make it so. "You can start by showing up when you say you will," I said. "By listening. By doing better. That's all they need from you." "And what about you?" I closed my eyes. "You need to let me go." He hung up. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. In the weeks that followed, I put more energy into the cafe project. Mel and I met every Sunday to sketch plans, brainstorm names, test recipes. I tried things I hadn't in years, experimented with espresso machines, researched sustainable packaging, rediscovered my love for baking from scratch. Sam offered to help me build a small counter for the back of Mel's store. He had a woodworking elective and wanted to put it to use. Kayla made signs. Painted little menus on chalkboards. We laughed a lot. Argued a little. Ate way too many test muffins. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized something I hadn't said out loud yet. We weren't just healing. We were building. A few months later, the cafe nook inside Mel's bookstore opened under the name Second Light. I remember standing behind the counter on that first morning, the smell of fresh espresso in the air, watching sunlight pour in through the storefront windows. The sign above me was simple, hand-painted by Kayla in muted shades of gold and sage. Sam had built the counter with reclaimed wood, the grain patterns running across the surface like fingerprints from another life. We didn't have a big opening. No flyers or grand marketing. Just word of mouth, some homemade scones, and a chalkboard that said, "Take your time. We're not in a rush here." It started slow. Locals trickled in, intrigued by the new setup. Some people just came for the quiet. Some for the coffee. Some for the feeling. And in that tiny corner of Plaza Midwood, something began to grow, something gentle and real and all mine. Brent, of course, found out. I hadn't told him. Didn't feel the need to. But Charlotte's not that big, and Rob's circle ran close to Mel's neighborhood. One afternoon, a friend told me they'd seen him walk by the store, glance inside, and keep walking. No drama. no confrontation. But I knew him. That meant something was brewing. Sure enough, later that week, I got a text. Brent, didn't realize you were opening a coffee shop now. Guess I missed the memo. I didn't reply. That Saturday, he showed up. I was behind the counter, Kayla beside me working the little cash box. She was wearing a flour-dusted apron and a headband that kept falling into her eyes. Brent stood near the shelves, staring at the menu like he was trying to decide if he belonged. "Hi," I said, meeting him halfway. "Here for coffee?" He shrugged, looking around. "Place looks good." "Thanks." He looked at the espresso machine. "You did all this by yourself?" I smiled. "No. With help. But the dream was mine." He nodded, slow. "Impressive." I waited. Because I knew that wasn't why he came. Finally, he said it, "I didn't think you'd actually change." I tilted my head slightly. "That's because you never believed I could." There was a long silence between us. Customers moved around us, the world didn't stop. "I lost you before I even noticed," he said, softer now. "Didn't even see it happening." I didn't gloat. I didn't throw his past words back at him, though I could have. Instead, I said the truth. "I gave you years of warnings. You chose not to hear them." He looked at Kayla, who was laughing with a customer, face lit up with something I hadn't seen in her since she was a child. "She's different too," he said. "We all are," I said. "Because we're finally allowed to be." The real moment of revenge, the satisfying kind, came quietly, weeks later. Brent's custody renegotiation fell through. Angela helped make sure of that. His inconsistencies, missed pickups, the way the kids started declining his visits, it all added up. Sam wrote a letter to the judge himself. Nothing dramatic. Just honest. Said he loved his dad, but didn't feel close to him. Said he felt more supported at home. Brent got every other weekend. Supervised at first. He called me, furious. Said I'd turned them against him. "No," I said. "You just made it easy for them to see who was really there." A month after that, I got a message from Celine. "Celine, saw Brent last week. He's not doing well. Just a heads up." I thanked her, but I wasn't worried. He couldn't touch me anymore, not emotionally, not legally, not spiritually. He had been so sure I'd fall apart without him. So sure I needed him to define my worth. But I had built something out of the ashes. Not just a cafe. A life. A voice. People started recognizing me, not as Brent's wife, but as Ava. The woman who ran that cozy place with the blueberry scones and quiet kindness. I started hosting Sunday morning coffee readings. Book lovers. Young writers. Retired teachers. People came. They stayed. They connected. And every now and then, I'd look out at the little crowd gathered around mismatched chairs, sipping lattes, and sharing stories, and I'd smile to myself. Because in the end, I didn't scream. I didn't fight dirty. I didn't tear him down. I just got up. Walked away. And built a life he couldn't enter.